This team, dude, these two teams have hurt me so much. I've been so scarred by these two teams. Hello, what's up, YouTube? Will Cho here, back with week 2 of VCT Pacific. We just wrapped up the very first week of stage 2, and we got our first look at a lot of these rosters that made some changes, some big, some small, but I think we all could tell the impact of a lot of these changes that happened in between stage 1 and stage 2 while Masters Shanghai was going on. So a lot of interesting things to talk about. Obviously, just as a caveat before we get into it, do keep in mind that we were playing on 8.10 in week 1. Now, starting this coming weekend in week 2, we will be on patch 8.11. So, you know, the ISO and neon patch, so to speak. And then the map pool will change as well. Breeze is going to be phased out. Haven will be coming back in. However, Abyss will not be in just yet. So also keep that in mind. And I'll try to do my best to keep that in mind as well as we're going through these power rankings and Pickems. But let's review how things went after week 1 and see what we're looking forward to, where we think these teams really are in their current state going in to week 2. So as always, we have our week 1 rankings that we did last week before week 1, basically what we were looking forward to, how we think each team is going to look going into week 1, and then we'll do this every week. Now, obviously, you know, in theory, there shouldn't be too many changes every week, but before week 1, we hadn't seen any of these new rosters or rule changes, so we had some expectations, and you can probably tell that it didn't exactly go as planned. Now, well, let's go through it. Let's go through the obvious. I think GENG, I think they looked way stronger. First of all, yes, I did predict T1 to beat them, and I don't think that was that crazy just because GENG coming off of a very tough schedule, obviously a very well-deserved win at Masters Shanghai. Even in stage 1 after Masters Madrid, it looked like they were content to kind of go back to the basics and slowly build up again. Like, don't take each loss too hard. Really work on making sure they're pacing themselves, etc. So I was kind of banking on that, plus T1 probably coming out swinging at full force. And I do believe T1 did that quite a bit. But GENG still held strong. So there is no doubt in my mind that they are still rank 1. But I would say Paper Rex is actually looking very strongly in rank 2 for me. And if they met again, they're very well again in Pacific, Paper Rex could trump GENG because Paper Rex was showing discipline. It's crazy. They were showing discipline against talent. They would peek, and if they didn't get the first shot, they would back up. Like, it was insane. They were holding post plant positions. It's crazy what fundamentals can do for such a talented team. So looked very good. Now I will also add that Talon looked weaker than I expected, so you know, take it with a grain of salt. But in some ways, that's actually what's more impressive to me, is that Paper X looked, or Talon looked weaker than I expected, and Paper X was still being like, yo, chill, like, we gotta play to win. I would say after that, it's still like, these are power rankings of what we expect, and somewhat when I do power rankings, I think there is a reason to add some potential in there, right? Because it's where you think this team's overall power level should be. But I do think it gets a little shaky. Now, I will argue that I think DRX is, for now, there's no reason to drop DRX lower, but the reason I hesitate a bit is just because DRX played ZETA division, and it's very hard to get a read when someone's playing ZETA division. We were talking about this when we were going through our Coast Hero and Challengers career. There are some teams like this where that opposing team, the way they play, it's much more dependent on how they play. So it doesn't really give you a good gauge, right? Because their results are kind of all over the place. Some days they play really well, some days they don't. Some maps they play really well, some maps they don't. And then that like changes over time. So it's not always a accurate comparison. But I would say DRX didn't show us anything crazy, right? It's not like DRX showed me that to have full faith that they're gonna be like a crazy strong team. I think they showed that, okay, the fundamentals are not gonna be shaken too much. I would say that the mechanics are very, very sharp, which is, I think, what everyone expected. They are now actually the youngest team in VCT. They've always been right near the bottom, but they are now the objectively youngest team for average age of the starting fives. And then obviously the calling seemed to be affecting Mako, which we've been told is the primary IGL. I'm still going to believe that Bane's doing a lot of secondary calling and mid-rounding, but Mako is the primary IGL. And again, that pressure, like there's a lot you have to keep in mind as a primary IGL. You have different dynamics, but it's still a lot of pressure. So you could tell it was affecting Mako a little bit. So again, I don't think they're in the cleanest and most perfect state that we should expect them to be in, but there's also no reason to drop them any lower. Afterwards, first of all, Talon is not going to be in fourth, because something I didn't consider is that, well, first of all, I didn't consider that they would go through these role changes where on Icebox Surf was playing Duelist. But then, like, not for all the maps, right? It's very interesting. Yeah. I'm kind of wondering what's going on, like what they're working towards here in Talon. There's bigger question marks for me on Talon right now. But also on top of that, it's not just because they lost to Paper X, because I think the way Paper X was playing, Paper X was going to win that day no matter what, because Paper X just came back and shored up a lot of their weaknesses. But I would say the calling was also very, like, and they did this in the beginning of in the beginning of stage 1, where Cruz's calling went like way to the other side, right? It was, they kind of, sometimes it seems like Cruz kind of over course corrects and says, we gotta chill, like everybody chill, take it slow, one decision at a time. And it's like, you were playing Paper X, so I think that hurt them a lot. I'm not going to say it was objectively bad, although sometimes I think it was a little bit frustrating to watch. But it did seem like there was a lot of cautiousness. And maybe it's because they weren't winning their fights. That, obviously, we've seen that affect every team. But it seemed like they were playing scared. They were starting to play more scared. They basically, I don't think Talon probably showed us much of what they had prepared for one reason or another. But the patch is coming in, right? And that's a big one for Talon, because Neon's getting buffed. And Governor loves playing Neon. His Neon's pretty darn good. Frost seems to have a lot of faith in his Neon. So maybe I shouldn't drop them too much. You know what? The other ones that would be around them would basically be like these two plus like kind of Team Secret. Chad, where am I putting T1, man? This team, dude, these two teams have hurt me so much. I've been so scarred by these two teams. T1 looked really solid against GENG. Like, they looked way better than my wildest imaginations. I even predicted them to win, but like they still looked better than my imaginations. I don't know. I'm just so scared that I'm going to put them at fourth and then they're just going to go right back to looking just messy as hell. And this is a team where I'm also like just not sure at all how the patch affects them. We had this discussion when we were co-streaming Masters Shanghai, but there was a discussion that came up where it seemed like T1 was trending towards making Izu comfy on Duelist. Like, that's where he shines best. They clearly want to stick with this guy on the roster. Let's make him do even better in his comfort zone. So we all had questions. Okay, does that stay true for Stage 2? And it seems like that is exactly what they're going for. Izu's now the primary Duelist. Saya is playing Chamber. So, I mean, we'll see how long that lasts, because, like, okay, well, are you willing to put him on every other Sentinel role as well, or is it mostly just the Chamber? You know, like, well, where's that going? We're not quite sure. He did play the Sage on Sunset, so I mean, it does seem like they basically want to put him on Sentinel, but so there's that. And then that does mean that X-Curate is now the primary Smokes. And that didn't seem to go well for him on that day. Although I think there's probably multiple reasons for that on top of the IGLing. So how does this patch affect them? I'm not really sure. I'm actually trying to take a look right now. I don't know what Izu's overall, like, obviously I know his Jet and Rays he used to play a lot of, but okay, so he's got 0 games on Neon. So I don't know if he's going to use the neon. He, kept telling Texture that he's going to play ISO even in the first week before the patch came through. So, he's having a little fun trying to bait people into thinking he's picking ISO. I actually think he is a guy who would pick ISO and do okay with it, but is T1 going to work around that? I'm not so sure. I don't know how the rest of this works out, but I will say Stax seems to be slotting right in. It seems like basically they went with this because they said we want to put Ezo on Duelist, make him comfy. We want to put Stax on Flash Duelist, Flash Initiator, make him comfy, and then we go from there. So, which is good. I'm glad they're doing that. And then I think this gives Saya a little bit more freedom to just aim, right? Like just work on, just make sure you're getting the 1v1 duels, put yourself in a position to get 1v1 duels. Don't worry about having to dive in, etc. Rossi seems to be now the flex for, double initiator or double controller, and things like that. So they're working to their strengths, which is good. That's a good sign. Just have no idea how the patch is going to affect them. There's a big question, but all things considered, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And then I'm gonna say it. This is a little bit of hopium. Okay, I'm gonna give RQ the benefit of the doubt and say that they were a little rusty. They had to shake off the rust a little bit in their first map. Okay, the calls were a little bit messy. But they seemed to clean up. It did seem like they were improving, within their match, they were cleaning up and being oh yeah, I remember how to do this. So I'm gonna have faith. I mean, first of all, Magnet does seem to be working very well for this team. Him actually bringing a little bit of the Paper X in him, a little bit of W Gaming, seems to be actually very good for this team. He's taking a lot of free agency on that front, but because he's not on Paper X anymore, you can tell that he doesn't feel pressure to go all the time. So it's actually he's actually gained more discipline on his own. And I think that's freeing up the rest of the team a little bit. Jemkin on the get-go, I mean, his aim is still good, but the util, it's very similar to when something was playing Breach last year. It's well, it's fine. It's fine enough that you could do that if you wanted a comp, but something from last year playing Breach into this year playing Gecko is very different. His Gecko has grown a lot. His util usage is now actually really solid on top of the aiming and opping. So hopefully Jemkin can get to that. But I'm not banking on that too much. Jemkin's obviously still the primary duelist here, and that's not going to change too much. But I have faith. I'm not going to count their first map against him too much. It's too small of a sample size to overreact. Now the big question is so my heart, I'm going to do this first. We might switch it, but my heart tells me I still want to put Talon in 6th and Team Secret in 7th. I know Secret has been doing a banger job. I know. In week 1, they won both of them. They had to play 2 matches and they won both of them. Team Secret, first of all, the opponents were relatively weaker. It was Bleed and Global Esports. And second of all, I haven't seen enough actual Team Secret being pushed as a team for me to really rate them any higher than 6th or 7th, right? Wild Oreo is cracked. I'll say that. He is giving us plenty of flashes of both Envy and Jeremy. So now that you have 3 of those guys that are putting up clips like that, winning 1v2s, 1v3s, having good pre-fires, etc., good flicks, that's great. That's great for this team. 2GE seemed a little bit rusty in the beginning, but he's gotten right into the flow of things. So firepower-wise, this team has gotten stronger. That's for sure. We just haven't seen them need to adjust a lot as a team, adapt as a team, have a lot of mid-round adjusting, etc. There were a couple cases of it, and it wasn't bad. But I do feel like they won a lot on, hey, we have this default, and our players are good, and they're winning their fights. So, we work off of that. And that's good, but that's exactly what's always made them a pretty good gatekeeper team. And I feel like they're just now a slightly stronger gatekeeper team. Whereas while Talon looked a little lost, this is why week-to-week power rankings are rough. This is why week-to-week power rankings are rough, because it's I have one sample size from Talon and it's bad. It was a bad look. But the reasons I put them high in week 1 does not change. That hasn't changed, and I have no reason to believe that they don't believe in that, right? I have, surely they see these, and then the patch. You know what? With the patch, I'm gonna put Talon at 6, and you can't stop me. Now, Bleed and DFM. So Bleed looks better. Oh, and ZETA. I totally forgot about ZETA. That tells you exactly how I feel about ZETA. I am indifferent to ZETA. I'm indifferent. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not, you know, they're forgettable. The way they're playing right now, they're forgettable. Again, that means they're not the worst, but I mean, I think I have to put them in 8th there, but they're not doing anything unique. They're not really doing anything special. There's not flashes of incredible mechanical brilliance, right? Like they're kind of there, and they're still able to punch back a couple times. Like they took a map off of DRX, but again, when I do power rankings, again, just a reminder, this isn't where I think like if we went into playoffs today, this is exactly what the results would be. I'm ranking what I think their power levels are. Like, what are their current performances plus the realistic potential that I see of this team? Like, what do I think this team is made of? And ZETA, to me, is made up of a okay team. Like, they're made up of a team that belongs in VCT Pacific. So, yeah, and the Icebox... Yeah, it's not it. It's not it. The Japanese teams and their iceboxes are... It's not it. Now, DFM is the one who did give trouble to RQ. I will say that I think DFM played... Actually, I think DFM played pretty decently in that match against RQ. I do think it was RQ's to lose, right? I don't think it should have gotten that close, and I think that's all on RQ. But DFM looked... fine. I think DFM looked just good enough to remind us that like they're not like they were last year. Like last year, they were blatantly, objectively the worst team. There was almost no hope for even an upset, etc., etc. But this year, I would say like it wouldn't be shocking if they got another win and another upset against some of these teams. It's just that their matchups are very hard, and probably the only one they can win is ZETA, which I think is this coming weekend. We'll have to check. But I will say I had high hopes for GE. But it was rough against Secret. And again, I mean, I was expecting this team to at least try to pressure Secret at a macro level. And you couldn't even test Secret on that for me, whether you win or lose. But Russ was a lot shakier than he used to be. I mean, I would say that actually the map draft and the comps were not in a manner where Lightning Fast was set up for success. Not he wasn't set up for failure, but he wasn't set up for success, right? His strongest were like the Icebox whenever he was playing the stages, things like that. So we didn't quite see that. And then Benkai was having a very, very hard time. He was having a very hard time. Blaze King took a little time to get warmed up, but I think Blaze King on the lurk, right? I think Blaze King on the lurk is good. I think it's good for them. I think Blaze King on the lurk and the anchor is good for them. But also, it seems like the way they're playing is much more about like, hey, we're going to do this, and then Blaze King, you're going to go get kills on the lurk, rather than Blaze King having some free agency to go create space when needed. A lot of times when it seemed like, at least from our bird's eye view, that a timing was needed from Blaze King, they weren't quite taking it. Now, again, it's much easier for us to read because we see the whole minimap. But I think it's looking tough for GE. I think this is what I do. And quite frankly, I might switch. GE and DFM could be switched here. I think they're kind of tied. I think they have very different strengths, but I can't... I actually wish May didn't perform as well on the Icebox, because I actually believe that they had some good calls. But because May got so many frags, and then after the first couple rounds, some of his teammates just like didn't get any frags, it makes it seem like it was just because May was carrying. But I don't think that's actually it. I think May was set up for success a lot on Icebox. But it's hard to escape the fact that it was May carrying, and then when he wasn't, it was not as close. So it's like, that's tough. But I think both of these, again, I believe in their potential. Again, they're all in VCT Pacific. I believe in their potential, but it's looking rough. It's looking rough. I actually think Bleed looks a lot more stable. Not only because they took a map off of Secret and then incredible comeback on Ascent, but they're going to have very clear strengths and weaknesses. We can talk more about that later, but it was the same in Ascension, right? They're much better at the defense. They play very, very heavy, like slow, just default hold and then react. They basically wait for their opponents to make mistakes and then punish it. So it's not going to work against the stronger teams. But they look a lot more consistent, I would say, in both their calls and their fragging, with Crazy Guy returning as the IGL and Scary able to focus on his frag. Same with Zest. So I give them a little bit edge over GE. These are what I'm looking at going into week 2. Again, when we say power ranking, this isn't what I'm thinking like, okay, starting week 2, this is how I think the season's going to finish. It's much more, this is where I see the power levels. Now, it is relatively in respect to, therefore, probably I'm thinking they finish in these ranges, but it's a very different tone, right? I'm not predicting what I think the ending standing is going to be. I'm telling you what I just think the power levels are of these teams. Because if you're talking about standing, you have to take into account the fact that like DRX is already qualified for playoffs, and there's a very good chance that they're guaranteed to go to champions one way or another. Same with Gen G and Paper X, and etc. And then like T1, they lost their match against Gen G, so now their chances of making playoffs are a lot lower, etc., etc. So it's not that. It's about how strong do I think these teams are as a team. Now let's go over to our Pickems. Okay, so as if you watch my YouTube videos, now you know to just never really put much weight into my Pickems because they're all over the place. But as some of you have so kindly pointed out in the comments on last week's video, my week 1 Pickems haven't gone so well. Now, I knew, I believe I said it on the video, I knew going into it that I was picking upsets. I just thought they were plausible upsets. And I would say the T1 Gen G was looking very plausible, but they weren't able to close it out. The Talon one, not so much. And the GE one, not so much. So, now with what we know, let's go into week 2. But again, keep in mind, 8.11 now. Big patch, Haven coming in, Breeze is out. Let's see how that affects it. Now, RQ versus Talon. I have no reason to really change this, so I'm going to stick with RQ over Talon. Talon looked very slow. I think RQ looked, sloppy, but I think they're going to continue to gain more confidence. And then RQ's Haven was also very good. Talon's Haven, like Cruz is calling on Haven in the past, I actually think has been really good. But I have a lot of faith in this team and how they can work the patch and the new map pool against the current Talon. So we'll have to wait and see. Paper X DRX, I think Paper X is going to win. I think they're going to pressure DRX. DRX is they're used to Paper X. It's not going to catch them off guard. But if they show the same discipline that they had, I think that's going to really force DRX to have to reach deep into the hat to pull out the rabbit in terms of macro plays. And I think Paper X is gonna do it. I actually think mechanically DRX is gonna have the best shot they've ever had against Paper X, but I think Paper X is now picking up on discipline, etc. It's basically an unfortunate time for DRX to run into Paper X in some sense. Bleed versus GE. I actually think Bleed's gonna win this. If GE plays the way they did now, they're going to play slow, and Bleed loves playing slow, and then GE, they're going to wait for GE to make mistakes, and then, or like Bleed's going to win the first duel, and then Bleed's just going to wait for GE to make more mistakes, and GE is going to make mistakes because they're down a man. So I actually think I'm going to change this. I think Bleed's going to win. ZETA versus DFM? Hold on. We'll come back to this. I don't know if I want to do what I always do, which is predicting upsets. Now, DRX versus... Chat, I'm not changing this. Well, DRX looks really strong, actually. But... And Flashback is just as crispy as when he left at kickoff. Do I do it? Do I do it? Do I do it? Do I do it? I'm going to do it because you know what? Magnet on GE almost beat DRX. He was the sole reason they went to overtime on that split. So I'm going to do it. But this would be an upset, I think, in the current form. And Team Secret versus T1. This one I'm going to flip to T1 because of how good they looked against Gen G. But this would be the game where if T1 plays any similar level to how they did against Gen G, this would be the game where Team Secret would have to prove to me that they have gotten better as a team, not just individuals. That their like macro and their reads and their calls and their adjustments, all of it has gotten better. But now ZETA DFM, chat, I'm already going with an upset on RQ DRX. I'm going to do it. You know what? My Pickems are already out the window anyway. But I'm going to do it just because this is literally the only shot DFM have at getting a second win this year. Literally the... Well, I take that back. Chat, DFM might have another chance. But I actually think DFM can beat ZETA. I actually think they can. Because I think ZETA is working so much on like longer term stuff, bigger picture stuff, that I actually think ZETA's gonna look more lost than DFM. I think ZETA overall is going to be stronger in firepower, like on average. But I think Zeta's going to look more lost. Oh, but the patch, you're right. Depp can play the Neon. May's going to pick the ISO and just put Depp on the ground, man. May's going to be like, finally an agent built for me. I can carry on my own. You're right, though. With the Neon coming in, Zeta should actually be favored here. All right, well, that's it. That's it. No, that's my pick'ems for week 2. I actually feel better about these pick'ems than week 1. I don't know what that says about me. You tell me in the comments below. You can tell me, but you know what? Don't kick me when I'm down. Tell me what you think before the matches start instead of after all the matches are over. But do let me know what you think. Obviously, we went through the power rankings earlier as well. Let me know what your thoughts are after having watched the matches last week. And if you're not sure, we're live every day of the weekend. Again, Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday here at VCT Pacific. We got some banner matches. The RX matchup coming back. RQ, both of these could be very close and exciting. The Japanese Derby should be fun. So, I mean, T1 Team Secret, I actually think is going to be a banger. And Bleed GE, I mean, this could also be an absolute slugfest. So, I think this week's going to be passed. So, I think this week's going to be packed. It's time for me to wrap up this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. And then, of course, much appreciated if you subscribe to the channel since we put up videos every week. That's going to be it. And I will see you on VCT Pacific.